Hey everyone, come on into this week's Extra Time, our little bolt on to our main Sunday session, and a chance to think about some of the questions which arise from what we've been looking at. Indeed, this week is Pentecost, so we've been reflecting on the story from Acts chapter 2 of the coming of the Holy Spirit on those first followers of Jesus following his ascension into heaven. As we said, Pentecost was and still is a Jewish harvest festival, a celebration of God's provision. Although with the coming of the Spirit for followers of Jesus, this festival has taken on a new additional meaning ever since. Festivals, though, have been and remain a big part of our calendar, opportunities to spend time in thanksgiving for the goodness of God's blessings on us. Indeed, thinking of festivals and COVID restrictions and live stream glitches aside, music festivals like Glastonbury continue to draw thousands of people together for a shared experience. So, as an opening icebreaker of a question in mind, if you could put on a 3-day music festival, who would be your choice of 3 headlining acts? Well, as we looked at in the session, the coming of the Holy Spirit at the Festival of Pentecost involved the disciples experiencing the presence of God in some pretty remarkable ways. For a start, we saw that suddenly a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. And as we explored, the nature of this wind of change reveals a characteristic of the Holy Spirit which is wild, untamed, unsettling even. In fact, it could be said that the Holy Spirit has come to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And so with this idea in mind, what's your experience of the Holy Spirit being both a comforting and a disturbing presence? And then, what do you think the Spirit might be wanting to disrupt or change in your life at the moment? Following the experience of this sound like a violent wind, the disciples then saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. As we unpacked, the role of fire in our faith is a symbol of God's presence, but it can also point to the refining work of the Spirit in our lives, shaping and purifying our conduct and our character. I mentioned that one of the ways in which this refining work might take hold in our lives is to consider what gives us, others, and ultimately God, joy. I shared the thought that were we to look back on our lives on our deathbed, I wonder what we might regret either spending too much time doing or not spending time enough. And so with this line of thought to prompt us, to what extent do you think joy is a helpful guide for what a refined life looks like? What things do you think you might regret spending too much or not enough time doing in your life? And what changes could you make in order to limit any of these future regrets? Following the wind and fire, we saw how the disciples were enabled by the Spirit to speak in different languages which meant that the crowds surrounding them heard the wonders of God being communicated in ways they could understand. And so a couple of questions in light of this. What do you think are effective ways to communicate the wonders of God in our culture today? And then secondly, how might these ways be more central to the way church life is conducted? And then finally, we rounded things off by finishing with a focus on wonder, this sense of being in awe of God, of Jesus, of all the works of the Spirit in our world. And so a final couple of questions for today. In what situations do you feel a sense of wonder? And how might we cultivate a greater sense of wonder in our lives? Alrighty, we'll pop the top on things there for today. Thanks as always for your willingness to engage with this stuff. Don't forget, if you want to keep up with what videos are coming out and when over the coming months, do subscribe to this St. John's channel. But until next week, take care and let's get together again soon. Alright, cheerio for now.